introduction, which we've done. Step 2 is where the licensing officer will outline the report. That's 5 minutes. And step 3 is the applicant will present their case in support of their application. Again, that's 5 minutes. Step 4 is where responsible authorities come in and highlight their reasons for objecting to the application or otherwise. Step 5 are the persons, which we don't have. Step 6, we enter into a discussion. That will be a 15-minute discussion. I mean, obviously, with these, some of these are quite similar in some ways. So we'll just have to see how that goes. I suppose what I'm saying is, I'm not sure if we'll need 15 minutes for each particular one, but we'll see how we go. Step 7, closing remarks, clarifications, that kind of thing. Step 8, final clarifications, and then step 9, we'll ask all participants to leave, and then we will consider our decision. So, if everyone's happy with that, before we move on, just to make sure that you are all sort of aware. Yes, Alan.
Chair, Councillor, I had in my mind, and perhaps I was being slightly presumptuous, that it might be easier to hear them all together. I know that you'll determine them completely separately and independently on their merits, but in terms of how I was going to present it, I was going to present it as one, which would probably take no more than 10 minutes. If you then wanted to ask questions about them all together, you could, or you could deal with them as separate applications. But I was intending to deal with them all together, if that might assist you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Root.
I was just going to say that I think that is a very good idea, as long as Mr. Riviere is happy with that too. Not least because I do think that there are some issues that we need to bottom out collectively, as it were, and it would be easier to do that right at the beginning rather than to try and do it individually and sort of end up with a big cumulative problem at the end of the meeting. So I just want to speak in favour of that approach.
Okay, thank you for that. Everyone, you will realise that this is quite a massive application. And it's our job to make sure that we don't kind of create any further problems down in Shoreditch. So we have looked at each one, obviously, in terms of the numbers of people involved. And just before we start, it would be good to get clarification on just capacity issues. So when you say roof terrace, is that part of the overall capacity, or is that separate? That's one question. And then the other question is, what do we mean by outside space? So you'll say, you'll have so many in the roof terrace and then so many sort of outside. So I'm not sure, because I imagine a roof terrace to be outside. Suba, do you want to come in quickly?
Sorry, Chair, we are not live yet on the stream. So.
Oh, do we have to wait?
Yes.
You want us to wait for that?
Yeah, we're not gone live yet. So, Mario, do you mind?
So we are actually live.
Yeah,
however,
we are.
they're just not the indicator in the top left corner of the screen today, just because of a technical glitch. But we are live.
Yeah. So I think Super, at the moment, Chair's just setting out things, and then he'll call you for the report.
Yes, exactly. So I don't want to get into too embroiled in this, but just because we've looked at this, in terms of the capacity, we've got, you mentioned a capacity for each particular venue, and then you mentioned a capacity maybe for a roof terrace, and then for people outside. And we've totaled all of those up, all those three separate. We've added all those totals up, and we come to a figure of 1,415, which obviously is quite a lot of people if every single venue was to be full, and we're calculating capacity on that basis. So, Alan, would you like to come in and clarify exactly what we mean by capacity? We mentioned 200, for example, the first one, 100 roof terrace and 30 people outside. Is that 130 people in total for the capacity of that particular venue?
I'm going to ask Neil to help me with this, because he knows the math better than I do. Can I just make some general comments about the capacity first? A significant amount of the capacity.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Mr. the solicitor for the applicant. Can you bear with us? We're not actually following our process, you see. We need to have the opening report from the licensing officer before you make your representations. So I do apologise. I think the chair was just trying to set things out as to what he wants you to bear in mind from the outset. And then he needs to hear from the licensing officer first, and then your application will come in and you can make your reps then. Is that okay? I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. I went off on the tangent.
No, it's okay. It's just that I appreciate we've got a lot to cover, but I'm conscious we may be losing the process. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Thomas, that's my fault because I did ask you a direct question. But okay, let's just get on with it and then we can get into the detail later. But you've got the idea. We've got a lot of people we're thinking about. It's an SPI. So from our point of view, you know, we don't want to be creating any more problems and shortage. So that's sort of where we're coming from. So licensing officer Suba, would you like to come in and present your case, essentially outline your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This afternoon, we are going to consider 8 applications received by the licensing service for a premises license under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for the Cotton Road. Out of the 8 applications, the 7 applications, which is Hewitt Unit 130 Cotton Road, the Bar Unit 1 22 Cotton Road, the Bar Unit 3A 18 Cotton Road, Hewitt Unit 2 5 and 7 Stage Plaza, 8 Stage Plaza Cotton Road, Bar Unit 2 Stage Plaza Cotton Road, 1 Stage Plaza Cotton Road, and 6 Stage Plaza Cotton Road have applied for the authorization of supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises and for late night refreshment on Friday and Saturday. And the 8th application, which is for the Stage 1 Plaza Cotton Road, have applied for regulated entertainment, late night refreshment, and to authorize the supply of alcohol for the consumption of and on premises as stated within the report. The police and environmental enforcement have withdrawn their representation based on agreed conditions. The applicant has submitted additional information for all of these 8 premises, which provides the breakdown of the hours and conditions which has been agreed with these responsible authorities. And this document has been circulated. Representation still remains from the licensing, and I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So if the applicant could come back, please, and you've got 5 minutes, Mr. Thomas, for this.
If you could give me possibly more than 5, because I am doing them all together. But Chair,
Okay, yes, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm completely in your hands. Chair, can I just deal with this general point first about capacity and these figures aren't finalised yet. They won't get any bigger, but they're more likely to get much smaller. I'm going to ask Neil in a moment about the roof terraces and the external seating areas, which, of course, just to make a general point again, are seasonal. Even on a day like today, you wouldn't be sat out on the roof terrace. The external areas are only going to be used seasonally. So, for example, if the internal areas are full, is that unlikely the external areas would be also full at the same time? These are the absolute maximum capacities based upon advice that we've had from our fire risk strategy and building control. The second point I wanted to make is that a great part of that large capacity is made up by the performance space itself, number 1 Stage Plaza, again, which won't be used all the time. It'll be, occasional use as performance spaces are. So those are 2 sort of general points just to set the picture, so to speak. Neil, can you help me, please, in terms of the chairman asked the question about the roof terraces. So I don't know if you've got the capacity schedule in front of you, but it's building 4 and building 5.
Yeah, that's right. Which are 6-stage plaza and 8-stage plaza. I'm sort of conscious that there's various different descriptions for the different buildings, but I think that's what on the application here. So I mean, the smaller of the 2 6-stage plaza, it's a sort of a pavilion type building. If you're familiar with the area, not dissimilar to the Vagabond wine bar at the front of Principal Place, to try and put a picture in your mind of that particular unit. Nearly all of the first floor is actually a terrace. So it's a lot of the seating for that restaurant is on that terrace. There's no outside seating around the front of that unit. It's all at that first floor terrace area. So I guess in terms of compared with some of our other units, there's a higher proportion of external area there, albeit it's a higher proportion of the seating for that unit.
Sorry, Neil, just pausing there. I probably confused myself. In terms of 6-stage Plaza, on the schedule we've got internal capacity 200 and 150 roof terrace. Are those mutually exclusive, or does one include the other?
I mean, again, we've identified an operator for this, but a lot of it will depend on how they fit that out. And I suspect that the 200 is very much at the top end of what's going to fit inside. I mean, they want to put a gin distillery in there, for example, which will take up an amount of space. But that's a particularly unique building. That particular one. The one next door, 8-stage Plaza, is our largest restaurant. So that's approximately 3,500 at ground floor, the same 3,500 square feet at first floor, and a roof terrace there. So it's a very big sort of restaurant pavilion building. We've identified an operator there who run 7 or 8 bars and restaurants around London. So they're both quite unique in terms of those buildings. With
pausing there a second, there was a couple of points I just wanted to reiterate. These are numbers which have been done on floor space. They haven't been done necessarily in terms of how the premise is going to be fitted out. So if you put your gin distillery or kitchen in, for example, these numbers are going to come down. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And
also to reiterate, both tenants will be high quality in terms of where they're sort of pitching themselves. They're not obviously they're going to be, the environment's going to be have quality furniture and landscaping and this, that, and the other around there. So it's
both of these restaurants, did you say?
The first one I mentioned, the smaller one, is a bar restaurant. The other one will be just a restaurant. Yeah.
Okay. I think we've sort of got the picture. It's a little bit confused, which is fine. So we will help to clarify things as we move forward. But Mr. Thomas, do you want to start now and have your 10 minutes from now? Just a...
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me okay. Just to pick up on that last point, the development, of course, is a mix of uses, including the performance space itself. The bar uses are very much ancillary and in the minority. So the great majority of that capacity is restaurants or performance, is restaurants performance space. The application follows the grant of planning permission by your colleagues a couple of years ago. I'm not saying planning permission binds you. I'm just saying that this is something that has been recognised by your colleagues that is attractive and appropriate for this location. Obviously, a lot is you've already recognised the fact it is a big application, and a lot is accordingly riding on it. That you might wonder why.
Mr. Thomas, can I just come in a second? Sorry about this. I suggest we all turn our cameras off. So yeah, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I was struggling to hear you a little bit there. The development itself.
Excuse me, can I ask you to stop, Mr. Thompson? Councillor Smith has been having technical difficulty, and he has to rejoin the meeting. So we need to stop until he rejoins. Thank you. Hello, Councillor Smith. Are you okay? I think he's still reconnecting. Bear with us. Councillor Smith? Okay, just bear with us.
Thank you. Neil, can you turn your camera off, please?
Okay.
Councillor Smith, are you back? Are you back?
Yep.
Councillor Smith, are you okay? Yeah,
yep,
sorry. I think we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, and I know you're having problems with your camera freezing. Mario, are you able to assist at all?
Hi, Amanda. It's a tricky one because if everyone has their cameras off, which we now do, it should help in terms of the overall call and freeing up bandwidth for just audio alone. But that's
Okay.
as far as it goes really in terms of what I can recommend,
Okay.
I'm afraid.
All right. Okay, Councillor Smith, are you okay? Can you hear us?
Yeah. I can hear you. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
And can you just check that your volume is up, because we can just about hear you.
Oh, I mean, everything's as normal.
Okay.
It's
All right. We
louder.
can just about hear you. Mario?
Sorry, just one more suggestion actually. There is an option to dial in by
Yeah.
phone.
Right.
Okay.
That I
It's
failed
just
to mention
ideally we
earlier.
want Councillor Smith to be visible.
Yeah.
How is it going, Councillor Smith? Are you okay? Do you think you want to dial in, or are you okay as you are?
I'm okay as I am. I can hear everything, but it's just a case
Okay,
of
we
if you
can
can
just
hear me.
about hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall I log out and try and log back in again?
What do you think, Mario? Should he try? Yeah.
I'm seeing as we just did that. I think it's
Okay.
probably worth remaining on the call, seeing how we get on.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay then.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas, off you go.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Just last point on that capacity, of course, we'd be more than happy to have, as and when the spaces are ready to open to the public, we'd be more than happy to have some further meetings with your colleagues from the Licensing Authority and Environmental Health, just to bottom these numbers out. So we could have some conditions that the numbers are to be confirmed, if that gives you some further comfort. And I can give you some drafting for that if you need it. Chair, this does follow planning permission granted by your colleagues. I say it doesn't bind you, but it does give you an idea that there are benefits that have been seen of this site and its location. According to the name of some of the units, the site itself, of course, was where William Shakespeare played in London, on one of the places anyway, hence the naming of the developments around him, and the performance venue itself effectively in homage to him. Chair, the singular issue, as you've already identified, is whether all of these or any of these would add to cumulative impact. As your policy touches on, what cumulative impact is about is having too many licensed premises in an area where the infrastructure can't cope with them, particularly in dispersal, and where there's evidence that it leads to increased crime, disorder and public nuisance. It often happens in high street areas where there's no singular ownership, and therefore nobody who can or does indeed take responsibility for people coming in and leaving the area. In the case of this development, it's the exact antithesis and opposite of that. We've got a single ownership. It's owned by Kane International. Kane also own a similar development in Islington, which is also in a special policy area. We have our own on-site management team. We have our own on-site security team. This is in addition to any SIA door supervisors, which are required as a condition of the license. We have our own CCTV system, which we can tell you more about in a moment, should you wish to hear that. We have our own cleansing. We have our own servicing. Everything, almost like a microcosm, an urban village, that everything that you need to have a safe place to live, work and visit is already here. And as I say, that's a complete opposite of where you normally get cumulative impact, where you haven't got any of these benefits: CCTV, site maintenance, ownership, and I mean ownership in the wider sense of somebody taking responsibility for the issues that arise on the premises. This development, therefore, doesn't add to cumulative impact, or as the policy puts it, negative cumulative impact, and is therefore exceptional in that and other regards. I appreciate there are a lot of applications. We could have done it differently. We could have applied piecemeal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We thought it was better to give you and the other responsible authorities a complete overview of what the scheme is in its totality. We had pre-application consultation with both the police and the licensing authority. The hours are within the council's core framework hours. You'll see those in the submissions that I've made, and that's important because, of course, not only does cumulative impact tend to arise from high street uses where there's no joined up ownership, but I said, but also it tends to arise later in the evening, and your core licensing hours recognize that having these uses within core hours both promote the licensing objectives and reduce the risk of them adding to cumulative impact. The stage itself is a mixed scheme. There's retail, we've got our own residents to look after. There's office uses. If you want to see, I'm sure we can put it on the screen if you've got any questions as to where is what, but we have many other both residential and commercial tenants that we need to look after the interests of. It's a massive 2.5 acre site with 25,000 square meters of office space alone, 4,500 square meters of shops. So again, as with any urban development, any town centre, if you like, these uses such as bar, restaurants, performance space, they're ancillary and they service the other uses that we have there. We have a WeWork there. These people need somewhere to eat, drink, possibly socialise, share new ideas, etc. So all of these uses are tied in together into the infrastructure of this mini urban village. In your own policy, Chair, in policy LP1, it recognises the variance of the offering between restaurants, bars, and event space, which provide a diverse offering. And your policy LP1B talks about where you have applications for evening and nighttime economy. You would look to the proposals reflecting the council's aspiration to diversify the offer at the same time whilst promoting the licensing objectives. So that's exactly what we've got here. We thought very hard and worked with the planners to come up with a diversified offer that fits and shoehorns very well into this, both in this immediate locality and the wider one within Shoreditch. So the issue is this, Chair, your policy LP10, which is the cumulative impact policy, obviously sets out the concerns about the impact on the physical environment and the safety of visitors and residents and disturbance. And therefore, but it also says if an applicant can demonstrate that the use won't add to cumulative impact in the operating schedule and at the hearing, then the policy hours within LP3 will apply. So effectively what that's saying is that if you're satisfied when you've heard me talking about the huge benefits that this development can bring to the area and the safeguards involved, provided that it's within your core hours policy, then it is in your gift to grant it under policy LP10 on the basis that it doesn't add to negative cumulative impact. We've gone into considerable detail in our operational management and dispersal plan, which was submitted with the application and amended since, which sets out how we disperse customers and how we manage them whilst we're on the development. It's very rare, indeed exceptional, for you to see such a dispersal and management plan for the reasons I said earlier, because the ownership of, let's say, for example, Shoreditch High Street isn't joined up and isn't owned by one individual owner and operator. And because we can manage the egress from the development, both people coming in and going out of certain exits with our own security, that in itself is beneficial because we can make sure that people leave quietly and, most importantly, safely. And of course, we've got the estate CCTV to back that up. One thing which is really important and is in this sort of self-speaking in this regard, and incredibly unusual, is that there have been no residential representations to any of the applications. Now, I can't say for sure that nobody would be concerned by it, but in terms of the public advertisement, both in the newspaper and in terms of more than 20 site notices that were displayed around the development, there hasn't been any representation, any concern whatsoever. And that either means that people don't care about it or that they're not worried about it. But either way, there's nobody that has been worried about it sufficient to submit a representation. And that, I hope you'll agree, is exceptional, and very unusual in an area such as Shoreditch High Street. I'm not going to take you through all the amendments that we've made to the application, and there have been many. I've set them out in detail, both in the summary proposals and the individual application summaries which have been submitted to you, and no doubt which you've read. But there are many amendments, including SIA security for the bar uses, curfews on the external seating areas, a requirement to have the management and dispersal plan, etc., etc., and particular conditions in addition in terms of the event space. So, Chair, those specific and very unusual safeguarding elements that arise from developments of this type, and there aren't many developments of this type in London, and from the safeguards in the operational management statement, they create a unique environmental enhancement to the area, which, together with the application package and together with the framework hours and the conditions, address the concerns in your policy and very uniquely promote the licensing objectives. The external areas themselves are recognised in policy paragraph 2.28 as adding potentially to Hackney's rich cultural heritage, diversity, and help bring communities together. That's what your policy says about the external seating areas. Neil can tell you a little bit more about the roof terraces and how they're being used, but I can tell you that in terms of the licensing objectives, the roof terraces shall not be used after 10 p.m. Sunday to Thursday and midnight Friday and Saturday, except for a small amount of persons temporarily leaving both of those premises to smoke. The applicant welcomes the introduction of the Hackney Nights Venue Accreditation Scheme. We've got our own radio scheme, but we're more than happy to be linked up with everyone else. And we see ourselves very much as part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So, Chair, I'm going to bring it to an end just by saying a few more things, and then we can answer some questions. I'm sure you've got 1 minute. Well, what are the key ingredients of policy LP10? In other words, what's the reason for a cumulative impact policy at this location? And how does this or these applications add to cumulative impact? Well, the single ownership, the fact we've got planning, it's a safe place to travel to, a safe place to travel from. It encourages culture, particularly the event and performance space. It's sustainable. We have a sustainable community strategy with a green and an open and cohesive way of supporting the local community. And that's all borne out as in supporting comments in your policy, is that greater choice, encouraging people to travel to the borough to enjoy their leisure time, generating jobs, employment and business opportunities. Chair, I'm going to leave it there for the time being. I think you've got the gist of what we're saying. Whilst this is a big application, there is nothing that you will ever see or hear that is as unique and covers all the issues which would normally undermine your policy in relation to cumulative impact. All of the concerns have been factors in from the very first day when this site was thought of 10, 20 years ago, and we've worked tirelessly to make sure that the application fits within your policy as far as we can.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I just wanted to mention that if you want to speak at all, that you need to click the little hand icon, and then you can come in. Councillor Root.
Yeah, I guess you'd be a bit surprised if we didn't have lots and lots of questions about an application of this size, and I'm not going to ask them all at once. But I do want to make a couple of quick questions, which I think might help us to understand the nature of things as we move forward, which isn't to say that I won't have lots more questions later. I do understand, as you rightly describe it, the very unique nature of this particular development and its location. One thing I do want to query a little bit is when you say that there have been no residential objections, and that's very unusual. It is very unusual. But in my view, it doesn't mean that nobody cares and that nobody's worried about it. It just means actually that nobody has really understood the cumulative impact of this building yet on the area. I don't mean the licensed premises. I mean that the building itself, because of the size of it and the scope of it, is going to have some impact on the area, and people really are kind of unfamiliar with it. So I think quite possibly local residents don't have a view because they haven't yet had the opportunity to take an informed position on it. And I think we, as people granting licenses, have to bear that in mind, really. So I suppose the first observation really is one of, I do take on board what you said about you could have applied piecemeal, but given the similarity of the management structure for all of these different outlets, you've decided to have a go all in one go. And I can see the rationale for that. But I guess I just want to put it out there that at this early stage, it does give us nothing to go on by way of a track record. And quite often, we might be looking at track records. So it's a question really about whether or not you might be amenable to the idea of us considering some only of these premises for licensing at this stage, with a view to them operating and then coming back to us in the not too distant future with some other applications for the remaining spaces, once you have a track record and we have been able to see whether or not the overall management plan actually works. So that's one question. Are we wedded to this all together approach, or is there a possibility of breaking it down? That's one question. My other question, sorry, that was a huge preamble, wasn't it, to a question, but I'm sure you understand it's complex. My other question really is to understand a bit more about the nature of the venues and what you mean by the term outside. Why do you think you're going to have people outside? Where does outside mean? Are you talking about downstairs at street level on the pavement? Is that what you mean by outside? So why are we looking at these large numbers outside, and what do we mean by it? I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Root. Mr. Thomas, can you just write those questions down?
I've got them, Chair.
And we can address those, I think, in the kind of discussion phase. That's okay.
I've written them down. I have them. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so we can just move on now to the responsible authorities, please, to come in. Channing, that would be you. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. The representation by my colleague, Mr. Hewitt, is made primarily on the basis of the application being in the special policy area, as it's been pointed out by the applicant. The application itself, in fairness to the applicant, they've gone to great lengths to illustrate the rationale for all of the different premises with the management plans and the dispersal policies. We welcome the suggestion of possibly confirming the capacities at a later stage, but even though it is in the special policy area, given that they're sticking to core hours and the police have agreed conditions and some conditions around the use of the outside space, it does seem one of the less contentious applications that we have to deal with in the special policy area. And based on what they've submitted, I feel that the decision about the license is really one of a policy matter. So it's really at the discretion of the members to decide if it's appropriate, because at this point in time, the licensing authority don't have that many concerns really regarding it, but we have to leave our representation in on a policy basis, as it is the special policy area. So nothing further to add, Chair.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for that. That's very useful. So step 5 is other person's case, and there aren't any, as outlined by Mr. Thomas earlier on. So we'll just enter the discussion phase. And Mr. Thomas, if you'd like to come back on those 2 questions that Councillor Root asked you, that would be helpful. and then we can move on to maybe just. I'd like to try and look at some of these a bit independently, just to see how we go with it. But if you just answer those 2 questions first, and then we'll look at the first one on here, which is 8-stage plaza. Yeah, we'll just go through that a little bit, just to sort of we can ask further questions and dig a bit deeper. Thank you.
Of course, yeah, I think that's a really good way of doing it. I'm going to bring Neil back in a moment after I've asked the questions to go through the units individually, and I think that's a good way of doing it. Can I just remind myself, as much as anyone, that this is right on the cusp, on the border of the special policy area. I'm not saying that makes a huge difference, but it's not right in the middle of it. One of the boundaries on the other side of the road is outside. So in terms of dispersal, we're dispersing greatly outside a cumulative impact area rather than into one. It's a small point. I'm not going to spend any time on it. Capacities, as you've heard, we'd be more than happy to have a capacity that those are determined in due course, and I can give you some wording for that. Track record is a really interesting and important point. Your policy, of course, says that you don't take track record into account. When I started doing licensing many years ago, we would turn up in the magistrate's court and we'd say, this is Mr. Jones, he's been running this premises for 20 years, he's never had any problems, etc. And this is the colour of his curtains, and this is the menu, etc. Things then change, quite rightly, because local authorities couldn't attribute particular problem to one premises. They were cumulative. We, of course, are slightly different here because we can see what's going on, and if we can see that there are badly behaved customers from any particular venue, we can deal with it. We have lease terms that can deal with it. We can deal with it by way of the management who are on site. So again, that's another reason why we don't have cumulative impact, and other premises do. But in terms of track record, it is a bit chicken and egg. I say your policy says you can't treat that as an exception in itself. The reason we've done it this way is that it's a very complicated leasing process of individual tenants making their own application. So if, for example, we left this to the individual tenants, they all would have made different applications, possibly with different hours, many probably with later framework hours, because the planning permission doesn't restrict the hours. And what you'd have a hodgepodge of applications, which would all be considered and determined separately, and there would be no relationship between them, no consistency. The advantage from our point of view is in terms of leasing, we can say, look, these are the license conditions, these are the hours, this is what you can have, this is the conditions that we've agreed with the local authority that you have to adhere to. So that in itself is beneficial as well, rather than them all coming to you piecemeal. In terms of councillor Rout's question whether some of the applications could be determined now and some later. Of course, we would prefer that than the refusal. I can't deny that. I'm hoping by the end of the hearing, you might be satisfied that you're happy to determine all of the applications and grant. But if you still have concerns, that is one way of potentially dealing with it. Another way of dealing with it, and I don't necessarily advocate this because I think things can get a little bit complicated and messy, but if you did want to have more information about the particular operators, as Neil says, we're in legals with some of them at the moment, we could come up with a condition that said that the license won't have effect until some further operation, until some further information has been provided, such as you would do with an operational management plan. So I think there are other ways that we can cut the cake up if you still have concerns about granting all of these licenses in one go. But I'm hoping, having heard from the licensing authority, Mr. Riviere, that I hope you feel slightly more comforted in that respect. The next question was the external areas. Apart from these 2 roof terraces, all of the external areas are directly outside the premises, the individual premises. They're just, dining areas outside. And there are conditions on all the licenses that those areas can only be used by seated persons, either for the restaurant's dining or somebody having a cocktail, but they must all be seated outside. There's no vertical drinking outside, and that is in the schedule of the conditions. I think those are the points that Councillor Rout asked. I'm happy to answer some more questions on it, or in the alternative, we can ask Neil just to go through the units one at a time and tell you a bit more about them.
Okay, I suggest, Councillor Root, do you want to come in?
Yes, please. I just wanted a little bit more clarification on those answers, if that's okay, before we move forward. Is that all right? Let's start at the end first. So just in terms of the external areas, when you say they're all directly outside the premises, do you mean on the pavement, or do you mean in an area which is actually within the confines, if you like, of the building footprint? Whether or not, either way, are you intending that they should be marked off from the pavement? Would there be some sort of balustrade or rope or something? So I'm trying to get a picture in my mind of how these outside areas will be used. I take the point absolutely that you're talking about seated customers only, but are you talking therefore about leaving the seats out for the whole time, or are the seats going to be brought back in at the end of the evening, that sort of thing? This is all kind of important in terms of the way that things can be used or indeed misused late at night. So that's one thing on the external areas. On the lessees and what have you, I mean, I absolutely take your point, and actually I think probably both Councillor Gilbert and I are grateful to you that you haven't left us with a complex arrangement of individual lessees all applying separately for different things. I think that really, really would have been an absolute nightmare to get through. Having said that, I don't think that you actually need us to grant a license to everything in order for you to be able to tell lessees that certain things are governed by licensing conditions. You, as if you are, as the organisation says it is, able to take control of a lot of this, then you are able to designate what the licensing conditions, from your point of view as the leaseholder, are that you're prepared to live with. So I guess I'm still nervous, really, I have to say, about the prospect of unleashing all of these licenses in one fell swoop. It doesn't give us any opportunity whatsoever to have some sort of gauge on the cumulative impact, and I'm sure that you can understand where I'm coming from on that. So I guess I'd just like your comments on that as well, please.
No,
can I just come in very briefly there? I think what will help with this is, how many of those venues are kind of ready to open now, for example. So which ones would be ready to open soon, and which ones are kind of going to be open a bit later? That might help us a little bit.
Can I come back to that point when Neil takes us through the individual units? Can I just answer Councillor Rout's very searching, very good questions, if you don't mind me saying? I'll start with the seating first, and we might need a plan to show where these seating areas are. Some are within the development, and therefore on private land. The others sort of potentially front onto roads such as Curtin Road, etc. But we can have a look at that on the plan, or Neil can describe that to you. The seating is removed, or at least rendered unusable, at 11 p.m. Or latest 11 p.m. It provides in the I think it's 10:30. I'm so sorry, I should have it in front of me. I think for the for the areas which are on the ground floor, the external seating and dining areas, I think they all finish at 10:30 p.m. Is that right, Holly? I'm sure that's right.
Yeah, it says that the external areas should not be used after 2200 hours for bar unit 1, bar unit 2, building 5, 8-stage plaza, Hewitt unit 1. Yeah.
So the furniture won't be left there all night. I can appreciate how these things can be used as weapons, etc. Just before I call Neil in to talk you through the seating in the individual units, the point about the individual tenants making or us not requiring these licenses in place to effectively guide tenants what they can do. I see your point. It's not always that simple. You can set out in a tenant what they can do, but sometimes they just go off and do their own thing. But there is a benefit of actually having the licenses that are all the same, even though you've told them that they all have to be the same. Tenants can be cheeky, and if you've given them something that the only way they can change it is by way of a variation, it does add, it does improve consistency and makes enforcement much easier as well.
Yeah,
I take your point on board.
So yeah, I mean, you would just be coming back presumably with the same licenses for other places later on. So you know what you want. You've kind of arranged that. You're pretty straight about it. I don't really see that there would necessarily have to be any kind of variations or changes to any of the licenses in the future. You just come back with the same licenses and license the rest of the premises once we've had chance to see whether or not indeed those licenses are working well as you say they will be. I'm slightly concerned about the idea that that you said we can deal with it when it comes to any issues that arise from the licenses or the misuse of the licenses. And I'm sure that your management structure is very robust and indeed that you could deal with it. But the bottom line is that it's our responsibility as licensing authorities to deal with it. And when it comes to anything going wrong, it is us that people will come back to and complain. So in other words, I take on board the spirit of what you're saying, but I think you also have to take on board the, if you like, the legal position that we're in being responsible for this as well. So I'm trying to find some way that we don't all have to jump into the deep end straight away together without quite knowing what it is. I'm trying to find some way that we can establish a way of us all going together and feeling good about it.
I completely understand, Chair. I suppose, just cutting to the chase, there's a couple of options. Obviously, my preference would be that you determine and grant them all today. The second option is you determine and grant some of them, possibly the ones that are going to be coming online first, and then we adjourn the other ones. Or the third option, that we have some form of mechanism that the licensing authority comes round and looks at it and effectively signs things off as and when we know, we've got that final detail, particularly in relation to capacity. I think those are the three options.
Yeah.
Can I go? Amanda has a question. Sorry, yeah. I'm doing your job, Chair.
Yes, through the Chair. Chair, I don't know if you want to check with the licensing authority whether or not there's any scope. If you were, because if you were minded to consider the point about checking or reviewing capacity or any other conditions in the future about a premises where you weren't 100% sure, whether or not a temporary license could be considered, maybe for the ones that you wanted to review again, because I'm not sure that we can just have the application on hold unless these operators are coming on board fairly shortly. So I don't know if you want to speak to Mr. Thompson about that. Thank you.
I think what's being suggested that you grant some of the applications on a time limited basis. I mean, that is another option of doing it. Strictly speaking, in law, we're speaking very openly, so please don't take any offence when I say things as they come out of my mouth. But it's not the sort of condition that can be imposed a time limited. It's something that we would have to agree to, and I'm not saying I wouldn't agree to it. It obviously makes it more difficult in terms of letting it if it only has a time limited license. But that, I suppose, would give you that sort of probationary peace of mind. That is another option. It wouldn't be my preferred option. The other option is that there is, as I hate to make comparisons with other councils, particularly one that starts with the word Westminster, but they have a process where the licenses only take effect when the final inspection has been carried out by an officer from the environmental health consultation team, just to make sure that we've done everything right and that the capacities are suitable, etc. So there is a mechanism there that that could be put into place.
Okay, Amanda, do you want to come back in?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Thompson, I hope you didn't misunderstand me. I wasn't suggesting that we would impose the time limited matter. That's the reason why I was raising it in open session, is that it would be something that you'd have to consider and agree to. But obviously you're saying that you're not prepared to agree to that, so at least we know that that's not something we can consider.
Well, I think everything at this stage is on the table for discussion. I think that's exactly the right way that we should do this.
Yes, so I don't want you to feel that the members are going to be making a decision which you won't have you won't be in agreement with. All the conditions and everything, if there is a condition they want to raise or anything else, that you would have to agree to it before they'd consider it. So it's not, members are never advised to just impose conditions or requirements. But Chair, I would suggest that the idea of if you were minded to approve the applications which you weren't 100% certain about, you could impose this requirement for it not to take effect until everything has been approved by the licensing authority. I don't know if the licensing officer, Mr. Riviera, can confirm that, or whether or not he has any observations about it.
Okay, Mr. Riviera, do you want to come in?
Okay, thank you, Chair. What I would say is, I mean, if the committee were minded to put those sort of conditions in place, we wouldn't have an issue with that. What I would say to members is that, given that the applications themselves are so similar, there might be some issues around, you know, refusing some and letting some other ones continue. Because if the conditions per se are robust enough to support the licensing objectives on one, then why would they not be robust enough to support the conditions on another one? Yeah. So that's just something to bear in mind for members.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Root, you had your hand up earlier.
I did. That was just because I wanted to check with Mr. Riviera whether or not the further licensing inspection before the others come on stream could be something that we could work with the licensing officers on, and indeed what sorts of things he might suggest for the licensing inspection. With regard to what he's just said, I think the obvious issue is that it's about cumulative impact. I'm afraid it's about sheer volume. So you know, it's very difficult for us to grant a blanket licensing, but something which is going to potentially bring in well over 1,000 new people into an area where we're trying to restrict cumulative impact. That is problematic for me, I'm afraid. It's just such a very big step in one go.
Just Chair, but if I can just come back to Councillor Rout and then Root, and then I know Neil wants to say something.
Very quickly. I have a proposal which I'd like to make after you finish.
I hope yours isn't as good as mine, but it probably will be. I think it does come down to capacity, as Councillor Root says, and the process that would take place with the officers from the council is that we would get them down, we would give them the final layouts, we would give them the final capacities for the bar areas. We would say, look, that is going to be seated over there, that might be standing. For the restaurants, these are going to be the final areas of the external areas. For the performance venue, this is where people are going to be sitting, this is where people are going to be standing, etc. And from that process, we will end up, I am absolutely sure, Mr. Barber, I hope won't tell me I'm talking rubbish, that those numbers are going to come down significantly. But even if they didn't come down significantly, there would be areas of mitigation, such as where persons would be seated or where persons would be standing, etc. So I think one mechanism, as I said, a condition along the lines of the licenses wouldn't take effect until the capacities have been assessed by the licensing authority, would, I think, I hope to the best of my ability, address the point that Councillor Rowett is making.
Yeah, I'm just writing that down. That was kind of the idea that I was thinking of. Neil, do you want to come in? I mean, what I'd like to do, folks, actually, and I think it might be useful, you might not all agree, but I would like to just look at the first application, just on its own, for the restaurant, 8-stage Plaza, Building 5, Curtin Road, London. Just to help us, Neil, you will probably get a chance, but you can come in now if you've got something to say that you don't want to be saying later, if that makes sense.
Please. I mean, just a very sort of quick, before I talk a bit more detail about that one, just to put it all into a bit of context. Obviously, it's a big application to consider, 7 or 8 applications that we've got made here, but it's a very small proportion of the development of the stage as a whole. I mean, the units we're talking about are well under 10% of the total size of the development. I mean, in terms of numbers, we're going to be bringing in 3,000 or 4,000 people, just in terms of people who are working and living there. Let alone, even if we don't open any of the shops and restaurants, it's a huge development. So as I say, in terms of the amenity value that we're looking to create through the retail and the restaurants and bars that we're looking at considering here, and up to the stage leisure element, is a very small proportion of the overall development, but very important for us in terms of the placemaking. And if I'm brutally honest, the value as part of the overall development that's created by these units is tiny in comparison with the office buildings and the residential buildings. So our number one priority is to create an amenity for our residents, for the people working there, and people in the surrounding area who'll come into the stage who work or live nearby, because that's what we want to create here. It's not just a case of sort of ramming in lots of bars and restaurants that are going to make us lots of money. It's a very tiny proportion of the overall development. I mean, if those who are obviously familiar with the area, I mean, Principal Place next door, with obviously the Amazon office building, Principal Tower, and all of the shops and restaurants there, is not, I mean, Alan did touch on earlier that there aren't many developments like this in London, and there aren't, but there is one next door, and obviously Broadgate further down the road on a different scale, but that mixes all this mix of uses up. And we're certainly not going for anything more, I guess, anything denser than they've got there, and a not dissimilar mix of the types of tenants, of everything from sort of whether it's coffee, bars, sushi, restaurants, bars and restaurants all day long, offers all sorts of things. We're looking at creating an overall mix, and all of our units are all a little bit different. I mean, we can touch on them all in a little bit of time, but as I say, we do range from a unit that will predominantly be a coffee operator that might want to have a license to serve a glass of wine, through obviously all day long restaurants, through to a couple of the bar offers that we've got here. So it is a real mixture. All of the units are different. Just quickly on the outside seating areas, the vast majority of the outside seating is on the roof of 6-stage Plaza and 8-stage Plaza. So all of the people in those areas have to enter and exit through those units, which will obviously be sort of carefully controlled, and then in the main, subject to bookings, they can't just sort of wander in and out as if you could on an outside seating area by the road. I mean, there are some of the smaller units do have seating areas. Majority of them actually open onto our public realm, if you like, on the piazza area. There are some areas that we've outlined on Curtin Road around the front of a number of our units, the front Curtin Road. I mean, we don't actually own that area. That'll be subject to the tenants being able to secure the appropriate pavement licenses. But as I hopefully that goes to explain that a little bit. I must admit, all the documents Alan's been flooding with, I'm not quite sure what floor plans actually have sort of filtered their way into the report. I found one looking through the agenda document, I think on page 269, which is a sort of a good summary of the layout there. I don't know if that's accessible for everyone. It'll help sort of understand the range and the spread and layout of the units.
Yeah, that is good. I mean, what would be helpful for us before we get stuck into this first one is which ones will be using public pavement. Which do you know which ones?
Yeah. So in terms of making sure I use the right addresses, so the Hewitt building and the Bard building are our two office buildings, which are already physically there. The Hewitt building's fully occupied by WeWork at the moment, and the Bard is being leased at the moment. So those units there. So in terms of 30 Curtain Road is the large unit. Well, it's a restaurant unit on the front of the Hewitt building, which has some seating both up the side of it, if you like, which is on our public realm, and a thin. And then in terms of the size of the pavement there, it is. I mean, I can see on the plan here we've only shown sort of really one seat deep. It is really just that very small area there. Okay. And then on top of the Hewitt building, where are we? I think it's 18 Curtain Road and 22 Curtain Road. Again, front Curtain Road. They're two smaller units, which we've identified an area on the pavement there. The other buildings towards the back of those two buildings. So units. So 2 to 4 stage Plaza, which is a small restaurant unit, shows seating along there, and also 5 to 7 stage Plaza, all that seating areas within our public realm, and we sort of very accurately can control that in terms of how it's looked in terms of the furniture, how it's delineated in terms of planters, and all of that sort of thing.
Are you saying 2 and 4 will be using public pavement or not?
No,
it won't. So basically, the only ones that are using public pavement then are the Bard Unit 3, 18 Curtain Road, the Bard Unit 1, 22 Curtain Road. Yeah.
Yeah.
You with me? And Hewitt Unit 1, 30 Curtain Road.
Correct. Yeah.
Those are the only 3 that will be using public pavement. Yeah.
Correct, and that's obviously subject to whatever pavement licenses.
Pavement license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I've got that. We can come to those later. So if everyone doesn't mind, I would like to just talk about the first application, which is for a restaurant, number 8 Stage Plaza. In the pack, it's the first one, building 5. In terms of the capacity, which is kind of the main issue, because you agree conditions with the council, the police rather, which is good, and with the council. We need to talk about smokers as well outside, and we need to talk about the roof terraces basically closing at 12 Friday and Saturday, as to whether members are happy with that or if they want to go to core hours, which suggests 10, which is policy, whichever policy number that is. But anyway, just on the capacity for this application. So the capacity is 225. It says 100 on the roof terrace and 30 persons outside. So does that mean then that the total capacity that you're talking about there is 355? That's the first question. And that goes to either Neil or Mr. Thomas. So what you said in the application is 225 capacity, 100 for the roof terrace, 30 persons outside. I believe that the outside space in this case is on the roof. Am I correct?
Chair, yes, some of it is and some of it. I think this is the unit where we have, maybe we can call the plan up in a moment, but there is external seating on the roof terrace and there's external seating on the ground floor, in the way that you find outside the restaurant. We certainly haven't applied for midnight. Off the top of my head, I think the hours that we've applied for the ground floor terrace are 10 o'clock, and I think slightly later for the roof terrace, which are in line with your policies on external areas. That's how we came up with those hours.
Yeah, I think the external areas LP6 suggests 10 o'clock. It doesn't, and that's for every day. So the roof terrace would be having to shut at 10 on a Friday and Saturday, not 12. If you look at LP6, which is page 10 in the pack, It says the licensing authority will normally restrict external areas and outdoor activity to between 8 and 22, unless the applicant can demonstrate that comprehensive control measures have been implemented. And the police were concerned about people sitting around and talking on outdoor spaces, because of the sort of there are some residents that live around there as well. Not as many as in other places, but there are still some there. So I don't know how you feel about that, but just to go back to my point about the capacity, can we just clarify exactly what's going on here? Is the capacity that you're suggesting, is it 355 or is it 225 in total? Because as I say, you've said 225 capacity, 100 in the roof terrace, 30 persons outside. So I just need clarification on this, Neil.
I was hoping you were going to say Alan just then. I'm struggling to find all of the right pages, the right documents at the right time.
Because we know that capacity is the key issue, and I know that we've come up with some kind of solution that we can go back and look at the capacity. But just for our own benefit, it would be good just to see what's going on here, just with this one application, for example. So I'd just like clarification on this. And Councillor Root, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something really, which is about local residents. There are, as you say, there aren't that many local residents there at the moment, but there will be your own residents as well, amongst other people. So we are looking at an area which is going to have more local residents. And I guess my issue is, this is a roof terrace which is not very high up, this building, is that right?
It's on the roof, so it's a two-story shop, two-story restaurant with the roof terrace on top of that. So it's quite high up, yeah.
Yeah, but compared to the rest of the building, it's
no compared to the residential, it's not. But I mean, as I say,
so the point I'm making, I guess, is if you said to me it's a roof terrace at the top of the building, I'd be a lot less worried about it because the noise would kind of spread out into the wider London atmosphere. But when we're looking at a roof terrace with that many people on it until midnight, and you're actually looking at.
Sorry, I think midnight was a slip of Alan's tongue earlier. It's not midnight on we're asking.
It's definitely not midnight. I think we were talking about 10:30 during the week and slightly later at weekends. But
yeah, I'm still worried about that. As given the location, I can just feel, I can sort of hear that noise in the hubbub of the summer, and we all know with climate change we're expecting longer outside periods. And it would kind of reverberate between the buildings and rise, so that's a problem, I'm afraid.
I think it's. I mean, the people that we're selling those apartments to are buying into this that they want to have this amenity on their doorstep. They're buying those apartments knowing what's going on in the overall mix of the estate. And as I say, the vast majority of the value of our development is in those apartments. So we're not putting a Wetherspoons there that's going to have a big pub beer garden on the roof and lots of noise. It's a very high-end bar restaurant that we're looking at that will have a very nicely landscaped terrace area there. I can't imagine that they'll be able to fit 100 people in it, but that's why we're looking to create all that. So it's really not in our interest to have anything like I know the license has to.
I guess I'm sort of trying to seek to get you to think what is the most sensible time, really, because believe me, there are plenty of people who've bought into car-free developments in Hackney who then lobby their local councillors to be able to have a car. So don't. I'm sure you're not naive enough to think that just because somebody buys something that's got a roof terrace, when they find themselves living 3 or 4 stories above a roof terrace, and in the summer every time they open their window after 10:30 they're still hearing all the conversations from the roof terrace, they'd still be very up for complaining. So kind of sensibly, what do you think is going to be the best time for you, really?
Well, Chair, there was an acoustic report done for the planning process, which has looked at you won't be surprised to hear your colleagues in planning wouldn't have granted planning permission for this without some evaluation of both the roof terrace itself and also the residential units. Neil, the residential units, do they have double glazing or mechanical air movement inside? How are
yes,
your
yeah, they've all got double glazing and that sort of a heating and cooling system inside them.
Chair, I'm just looking back at what the policy says about external seating areas. We've asked, as you'll see in the application, for them to be used until 10 o'clock Sunday to Thursday and 11 o'clock Friday and Saturday. And I think the chair was suggesting possibly 10 o'clock as an alternative. Before we come back to that issue, in terms of capacity, which you're right is underpinning all of this. Of course, the number of smokers, for example, that number has been left blank at the time being, because it does tend to be an operational issue as and when the tenants take occupation. So that's another thing that the licensing authority could determine as and when the licenses take effect. And as I also anticipate, those numbers for the external areas will probably go down rather than go up, or you could set a maximum in any event, even if they had to be determined at a lower figure. So, Neil, can you cast your mind back in terms of any conversations that were had with the local planning authority about the roof and noise, etc.?
I must admit, not on 8-stage Plaza, which we're talking about at the moment, because it was part of the original planning application quite a number of years ago. But 6-stage Plaza next door to that was only an application that we got through in the last 3 or 4 months. There was previously a temporary planning application on that site that we converted to a permanent one. And so that unit, obviously that's a 2-story pavilion with the external seating area on the top, only got planning 3 or 4 months ago, but it wasn't there weren't any issues raised with regard to that during that process.
Okay, look, I don't think you still haven't really answered my question about the capacity in regards to this particular 8-stage Plaza. Is the capacity that you're mentioning, is it 355 or is it 225? You know, what is it? Is it 225, you know, indoors, whatever, 100 on the roof and 30 people outside? Or is it the total? What's the total? Just, if you don't know, just say, you know.
Just whilst Neil's trying to find that schedule, I can send it to him now, so he's got it on his screen. I know I'm repeating myself, which I apologise. These, of course, are numbers which, you know, when this question was asked by the licensing authority, when the applications were submitted, these were figures which Neil had to calculate based on the floor space.
Yeah.
So
sorry, can I just come in, Mr. Thomas? The problem is that they don't appear to be accurate, and you keep saying they're going to come down, but you can tell that they're obviously giving us cause for concern. I mean, just on the roof terraces alone, we're talking about between, you know, this one and the other one, we're talking about 250 people on roofs in that building, potentially, according to the figures that you've given us. The total figure of the number of people around the building, in fact, I forgot to include the 400 people in that total from the event space, would be 1,815 if every venue was full to all your capacity figures, which is a lot of people that we have to basically consider in this SPA.
It's a huge development. I mean, the performance space is actually all in the basement, where we've obviously got the archaeology and the curtain theatre stage where Shakespeare performed and all this, that, and the other. And that's not going to be I mean, I know we're sort of digressing onto that unit, but that's not going to be a regular restaurant, cafe, or anything like that. It will have the odd event on it, but it's predominantly, you know, a Shakespearean tourist attraction, if you like. I'm not describing it very well, but it's, in terms of licensing, it's going to be the odd event. It's not a permanent, you know, unit that allows for that sort of thing. But yeah. I think, I mean, let's just not get away from this. Is a huge development, and we're talking about a very small proportion. So the numbers do sound big, but it's in the context of a very big development. The restaurant we've started talking about is the biggest restaurant that we've got in the whole development, and it's a very big restaurant. You know, it's probably twice the size of an average, or 3 times the size of a normal restaurant, plus a roof terrace on the top. So it's you know, it's quite a bespoke unit that's only. And really sort of a small number of quality
Neil,
we're talking to about
Neil, in terms of perhaps helping you to answer Councillor Smith's question, what are your thoughts on the roof terraces being 10 p.m. rather than 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday? At this stage, I think what Councillor Smith might have been thinking but didn't say, although I don't want to put words into his mouth, that 10 p.m. for the time being, and come back later and we'll talk about the extra hour Friday and Saturday. And if that's what he was thinking, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I guess it just makes our life difficult. We're in detailed discussions with an operator on that one at the moment. Obviously, they're aware of where we are on the licensing, but I mean, their aim is to create a very quality, environment up there, and with beautiful landscaping and seating and sort of umbrellas and all this, that, and the other, and it'll severely, I guess, limit if they've got to sort of start kicking people out at 9:30 or whatever. It'll be a negative for them, but
well, I think we're only talking about difference on Friday and Saturday, because we've already agreed 10 o'clock Sunday.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So it would affect you on Friday and Saturday. I think, Chair, we're going to have to leave that as a matter for you. Obviously, it'd be our preference to have later, but I can see why you asked the question, and I think we'd be happy with I appreciate what you're saying about the maximum capacities of the outside areas are still high, 150 for 6 stage Plaza and 100 for 8.
Yeah.
But it would be in your gift, of course, to make those the maximums, and of course they could come down, and of course they'd still be subject to the sign off by the licensing authority.
Yeah. Okay, Amanda, you had your hand up.
Yes, Chair. I was just wanting to clarify that did you get clarification on how close the local residents were to the venue, and also in terms of the capacity figures, if you were going to consider reducing them, do you want to sort of go into that, what sort of figures you're looking at there, if that's what you wanted?
Well, I wasn't necessarily suggesting that we reduce them. I was suggesting that we cap them as a maximum, and then they would have to be assessed then by the licensing authority in any event. As I say, I mean, it might help to look at the plans of the 2 roof terraces so you can see the size of them. But the exercise the licensing authority would go into is that we would say, look, we might only want 150 people if it's a standing event, and there might be, if it's going to be laid out as a restaurant, it might be less than 150. That's what the conversation we would have with the licensing authority if and when that condition was acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the moment though, members are saying that they're not satisfied that you've been clear on the capacity on certain of the buildings. So
yeah, as I say, I think
the schedule looks quite. So I'm just trying to open it again. The schedule looks quite clear here. It says 225 internal and 100 roof terrace plus 30 ground floor.
Yeah, that's what
the maximum for that unit is whatever that is, 355.
Yeah.
So those figures are exclusive, I think, is the answer, albeit they are estimated figures at the moment, which could be capped.
Yeah. Can I just ask you how you came up with those figures?
I guess it's just an analysis of roughly how many covers a restaurant can fit in. I mean that building, as I said, it's got a large ground floor area, a large first floor area, which could easily sit over 100 110 covers on each of those floors, and the roof terrace was it's 2,500 square feet. It's quite big there, with just a sort of again giving ourselves a bit of leeway in the negotiations we've got with various occupiers, so as it wouldn't sort of fetter what they would like to get up there. But as Alan said, it's very much a maximum. You wouldn't be able to seat more than sort of 100 people seated up there.
Yeah, that's going to be a hell of a restaurant, isn't it? Licensing, please, Channing. I would like to ask you a question about this. In the proposal, let me go back and we kind of assess the capacity, look at the smokers and things like that. I mean, is that something that might be of interest to the licensing authority?
Chair, if the committee are minded to go down that route, then that is something the licensing authority can facilitate, to look at the capacity. And for smokers, usually that figure would usually come from our environmental protection team.
Right.
So we can look at it if the committee decides, but I'd suggest for smokers, maybe we can interact with our environmental protection team, because they're the
Yeah.
ones who usually get those kind of complaints about noise from smokers, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think we've kind of. I just want to ask Councillor Root if you've got any point of clarification. I would like to move on to just one more, which is the restaurant, the bar unit 1, 22 Curtin Road, because that's the one that involves the pavement license, and I believe, or is that the one I'm after? What is it? I mean, no, it's the bar. It's the bar, actually, the bar. So the bar, which is, excuse me, the bar unit 3, 18 Curtin Road, where, just bear with me so I get the figures. So this one is 200-person capacity in the basement, with an additional 35 seats outside. So those 35 people would be potentially seated on the public pavement. So I kind of, Councillor Root, do you want to come in with any clarifications on the first one before we move on to the second one?
No, I'm happy to move on to the second one. That's good.
I mean, my feeling is that your proposition to to come back, the licensing, assess the capacity and the smoking stuff, that sounds like a kind of a reasonable way to go. But I would just like to look at the bar. So that's the bar unit 3. I mean, obviously, if this is a 200 capacity bar, again, it's quite a lot of people. And again, if we max out the capacity on the pavement, that's 35 people on the public pavement. Mr. Thomas, do you want to come in and talk about that one?
With some help from Neil in a moment, but these are seated customers, of course, and it's seasonal, and of course the hours are restricted as well. So there is some mitigation there, and of course it'll be subject to the grant of a payment license. We haven't formally surveyed it yet for the purpose of a payment license, so it may well be the case that when our pavement license is submitted, that your colleagues in highways will say, actually, you can only get 10 people there, because of course anything you grant now is always going to be subject to the pavement license. They're going to assess the width and the capacity of it. So I say those numbers are only going to come down, but in any event they're mitigated by seasonal concerns and the fact that it's only persons who are seated.
Okay. Amanda. You want to come in? You've got your hand up, or is that a legacy hand? Hello? Can other people hear me?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, you can.
I
Amanda,
can hear too.
did you want to come in, Amanda, or is that a legacy hand?
Sorry, my mouse went a bit funny there just now. Sorry about that. I do apologise for keeping you. My mouse wasn't working. What I wanted to just remind Chair is that there are some environmental conditions which weren't approved on all the applications. I don't know if you want to ask the applicant solicitor whether or not they're going to agree with the same conditions for all the applications. If that assists you, thank you.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Mr. Thomas?
I did. Which conditions in particular are we talking about? We did have. You won't be surprised to hear we had lots of meetings.
Environmental protection conditions.
They were more concerned about the bars than the restaurants. So I'm just looking through these submissions, if you can bear with me a moment.
There was 8 applications in total. They've only given conditions on 4 of them, and we understand, and therefore there's 4 without conditions.
Well,
so that's why we're asking whether or not you'd agree to those conditions going on to the other 4
But
applications.
let me just work out what they were. But the reason I only agreed 4 is that they only wanted 4. Are you talking about?
No, 4 applications, not 4 conditions.
Yeah, no, I see your point, but they only asked for the conditions on 4 of the applications. If they'd asked them on 8, we would have, had that conversation about whether they wanted them on 8. I can't remember, to be honest, off the top of my head, whether they asked for them on 8. We'd have to look at their representation, whether they withdrew or whether they just asked for them for 4. The conversation that we had in terms of environmental protection was very much more focused on the bars rather than on the restaurants. But if I can just find those conditions because I have them here somewhere.
Is anybody able to put their finger on them to guide us all to where they are?
I'm just going to try and find them now, Chair, because they are in the submission.
It's just in the representation that the environmental
Susan,
license.
would you be able to assist us? Because I think you may know something about
Yeah, it's from your additional information. Those are the conditions which was agreed for Bar Unit 122, 8-stage Plaza, Bar Unit 318, Curtin Road, and for Unit 130, Curtin Road, and 3-stage Plaza. So the conditions are the notice of the display of the external areas as well as the smoking condition for the external area.
Yeah, it's in, Chair, it's in, if it helps you, in my summary of proposals, you'll find a table under paragraph 10.
Yeah.
And that sets out the conditions which environmental health asked for, which units they asked for, and which ones we agreed. Now, look, I don't think, in short, in terms of the first two conditions, which were in relation to notices, we've got no problem having those on all of the applications.
Yeah, well, that's what we're asking. That's
Yeah,
good.
no, I don't know why they didn't.
They're fairly generic, Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, I agree. And in terms of, so we're more than happy with those. Just to be being open. The 10:30 p.m. Condition for the external area, of course, only applies to premises where there is an external seating area.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about the roofs. I'm talking about the ones at ground floor. So where there are premises with external seating areas, and in this case, in terms of the barred unit 3, you'll see that I think that must be the bar unit, the barred bar unit that we've restricted. We've actually restricted the number of smokers. So we did have a conversation there because you're quite right. Environmental Health said they were worried about the number of smokers in the bar unit.
Okay. Councillor Root, do you have any questions about the bar? The one where we have 200 people in the basement and 35 people outside on our pavements. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask about that?
I don't think so. I suppose, you know, constantly we could keep coming back to the same thing about how, well, in my mind, I keep coming back to the same thing about how some of these, it's very difficult to really know how it's going to work until it actually goes into practice. And this is I think, as you rightly said, the largest of these bar proposals and the one which is likely to have most impact. So I guess my question is just a question around, if we were to go down the route of saying, let's grant some of these licenses and see how they go, this would be one that that I'd be inclined to say, let's see how it works. Because, you know, obviously the police, environmental health, etc., have been through all of the conditions with the applicant, and so they're satisfied that it would work. So this would be a good example for us to take this as the largest one to see how it works before we added to it with any smaller licenses. I just wonder what other people's thoughts are about that.
It's quite a unique unit, as you said. Most of it is in the basement, so it sort of does lend itself to more of a bar offer. It's also on it is on the farthest sort of southwestern tip of the development, sort of fronting Curtin Road and Herne Street. So it doesn't really open out or face into it almost sort of turns its back on the rest of the development, and is more in the sort of the Curtin Road world. So I'm not quite sure about how delaying that would. I mean, that unit almost needs to be sort of looked at on its own. It's not close to any of the other units. It wouldn't sort of necessarily directly impact them in the same way as any of the other units around the periphery of our site owned by other people. So it's quite a.
Well, Neil, I thought in fact what Councillor was asking was suggesting that that's granted first, and then that being the most intense one, see how the other ones get on.
It was a suggestion about how that could go. I mean, you know, what Mr. Barber's just said may be another reason for not granting it first. But I just wondered, you know, if we were to go down this road of let's grant some of them to see how they go, is this one that you would want to have granted early on, so that you can see how it goes as well?
Not really. I'm purely thinking in terms of sort of where things. I mean, whilst the unit's built and ready to be occupied, we've had a couple of offers on it, although not from operators that we're excited about yet. Whilst we're developing two of the other deals are in lawyers' hands, and another one to follow quite shortly. So it wouldn't be one of the ones we'd want to choose first. But as I said, I don't think it's almost. It wouldn't necessarily help demonstrate how the impact of the other units are. It's a long way away from them. There's far more. There's many more units closer to that one that are outside of our site that it would relate to. But all of our other units are, it's a huge site. They're a long way away from that one. So I'm not sure if that would necessarily.
Neil,
Okay.
Take the.
Can I ask a couple of questions? Sorry, Chair, this is slightly cheeky of me, really, but it's a question to Mr. Barber, I suppose, and to Channing as well, which is, if we were looking at trying to sort of not give everything all at once, would you rather have sort of full license to operate as of now with what you're asking for a limited number of these different premises and hold back on some of them? Or would you rather go down the other route that we've been talking about, which is to agree that we can give a sort of, if you like, the equivalent of a sort of outline planning permission, really, an outline licensing permission, subject to finalising with the licensing department for the whole caboodle? I just wonder, from Mr. Barber's point of view as the overall manager of the building, and indeed from the licensing officer's point of view, which of those two options is better?
I mean, I guess from our, I guess the certainty that Alan touched on earlier is important for us. Obviously, we've been, I guess, marketing the commercial space here for certainly 18 months now. Obviously, the hospitality market, has had all sorts of challenges. I'm sure you're aware over the course of COVID, and it's beginning to come out of that. And we're fortunate that Shoreditch is such a thriving area, and the development of a sufficient quality to be able to attract some good.
Neil, can you give the councillors any information about the sort of tenants that you might be attracting to the various units? I appreciate you might not want to give names for reasons of confidentiality, but for example, in terms of the bars, which one's going to be a bar and restaurant rather than a full-on bar, and which one is going to be a bar? I understand the one in the basement that's earmarked as a bar. Can you give members an idea of the sort of operation or tenant that you're interested in?
I mean, that one, as I say, we've had quite a number of interested parties on that one who are seeking wider hours than the standard sort of policy hours that obviously we're looking for here. And we've said to them, look, we've explained to them, the sensitivities and the fact that we're in a special policy area, etc., and that we're going through this process of getting everything at the same time. So we've sort of we've sort of kept them at bay, really, to sort of see how this whole process goes, while we've been focusing on some of our other units. The other, so 6-stage Plaza, the other of the smaller of the two pavilions in the Piazza, is the other one where we're looking for more of a bar offer, and we've got a letting agreed there with a gin bar that will have a bit of a sort of a distillery within the ground floor area. The concept will be sort of a gin themed bar, and there will be some ancillary food that goes with that.
So in terms of that unit, that's not an out-and-out bar. That is something that's much more, to use Councillor Bout's analogy in planning speak, much more sui generis rather than.
Yes, well, that's absolutely. I mean, we've the planning use which we just got for that building is worded on that basis. Yes, as I say, it's not a straight out-and-out bar. There's an element of distillery and retail in there as well. As well as gin, a general, so sort of a higher end sort of, gin cocktail bar. The one next door to that unit, 2-stage Plaza, again to the Bard, is in solicitor's hands. It's got a small restaurant with a small independent sushi restaurant. We've got one other in Brixton, so that's in lawyers' hands on that one at the moment. The biggest pavilion that we were talking about, 8-stage Plaza, we're just trying to finalise terms with a company who have 8 or 9 bar restaurants predominantly around southwest London. and again for well, it's a restaurant with bar attached. They do really nice things. I visited their one in Canary Wharf a couple of weeks ago, where they've got a great outside seating area. They've got lovely outside seating areas in all of their restaurants. So they're in that one. I mean, there's a blend of other types of uses. We're still marketing a few other units. The other one on Curtain Road, where we're talking about the pavement license, that actually opens out sideways into our big office reception area. So that's going to lend itself as more of a coffee unit, but with the emphasis of perhaps turning into a cocktail bar in the evening, or being able to serve glasses of wine in there. So very much and due to the size of it, it's only 1,200 square feet. Again, it's not going to be a big well, certainly not a big drinking place. As I said, we talked about the I always struggle to describe it, but the curtain theatre space, which won't be a regular licensed venue. The other thing, I think, just to quickly add, I'm sort of digressing a little bit, but when we did get planning permission for the rest of the whole development, we didn't get consent for restaurant use on all of our units. The Viaduct building, which I don't know if you're familiar with, where we used to have our marketing suite, which is just under construction, which is just being refurbished at the moment, some roof gardens going on the top. That's only got A1, well, in old money, A1, A2 uses, and the units in the base of the residential tower as well have only got A1 or A2 uses. So that they were sort of, I guess, granted to reflect the fact that they're a bit closer to obviously to residents, both our own and neighbouring buildings across the way. So it's really only a handful of our units that we're talking about now.
Okay, great.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to. I think part of the issue, and I understand that you need the capacity figures to market the venues and everything, and you need to kind of have flexibility around that, and you want to make it attractive for people who want to come in and run these places. It feels to me that we just need to nail the capacities down a bit, and which means essentially, that you guys working together with the licensing authority and the particular, whoever is going to be running the particular venues in question, working all together to come up with a figure, really, which we can, a real figure, really, because these figures are not real at the moment, are they? We need to see real figures. So I kind of like the idea that putting a condition in around this license will not be approved and not take effect until the capacity has been assessed in conjunction with yourselves, the operator, and the licensing authority, and obviously another condition around the smokers as well. I mean, that seems logical to me, that we really need to nail down the capacity levels properly.
I think it does, Chair, because it's been a common theme throughout the hearing, and of course, the lesser the capacity, the less cumulative impact there is. Can I give you the wording that I have in mind now for your advisor to take a note of it?
Yep.
The license, because obviously this will be a condition on each of the licenses. The license will have no effect until the capacity, open brackets, and number of smokers, close brackets, or you could have that as a separate condition if you like. So the license will have no effect, and the capacity of the premises has been determined by the licensing authority and the environmental health protection team. You could have those as separate conditions if you wanted. So the first condition in relation to capacity would be determined by the licensing authority, and the second condition would be the license will have no effect until the number of smokers has been determined by the environmental health protection team. You could have them as one or two conditions.
Yeah, I've kind of got some of that. Amanda, did you manage to write some of that down?
I've got all of it. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Okay, that's good. There was another condition that we mentioned.
Yes, the dispersal policy. I was going to ask if we could amend that to include our standard wording. I know it's applicable. The policy will be applicable to all of the area, but we wanted to ask. I think, Chair, if you could ask whether we could amend that. The wording.
Yeah, do you have the wording there that you could just?
Yes, I do. Yeah, just bear with me. Yeah, so the wording is there shall be a written dispersal policy to be approved by the police and the licensing authority, and a copy of which shall be kept on the premises and made available to the police or other authorised officers upon request. This condition shall apply to the entire area. So I was going to add on the wording that's in the condition that's on the draft proposal, incorporating it with this standard wording that we normally use. Would that be okay, Mr. Thompson?
Thomas.
Yes.
So I forget my own name sometimes.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. We're happy with that. What wording were you going to add to it? The wording I've got is
Yes.
there should be a written dispersal policy to be approved by the local authority and the licensing authority and the police, and a copy of which should be kept available for inspection. What were you going to add it to?
It was just that we have, I think we probably did it a different way round. That was all. I was just going to, I mean, we can keep that in, or I'll ask members what they prefer then. I mean, it's just our standard wording that there should be a written dispersal policy to be approved by the police and the licensing authority.
But we're more than happy with that. But my only request is because the police have already approved it.
Yeah.
They've seen it, that we take the word police out and it's just
Okay.
approved by the licensing authority.
No, it can be approved by both the police and the licensing authority because this is quite a big site. So
all right,
that's fine. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that, Amanda. So the other condition that we did mention was, which we could maybe include in the condition that you've just formulated, Mr. Thomas, which is in reference to further information provided about the operator as well, because I think we need to bring in the operator, the licensing authority, and you guys all together to work out all of this stuff, right?
I think it's difficult in terms of your policy in the law, sort of making the license conditional upon who the operator is. Trust me, if there was an easier way of doing it, I'd be the first one. I think the only way you can deal with it is by way of approval of the dispersal plan and approval of the capacities. If you were saying it needs to be subject to approval of the operator, because indeed what your own policy says, that you disregard the quality of the operator. If that's what you were saying, I'm not sure that's possible.
Yeah, I think I got that from Mr. Riviere. But I just want, before you come in, Channing, I do have a question for you as well. So, if this license that we may grant covers all of these venues, what happens when one particular venue wants to come back for a variation? How does that work? So you might want to.
Chair, from what I understand, they're all separate applications.
Okay.
So each individual premises can submit its own variations, etc.
Yeah, maybe treated on its merits, but you're right. He's right. They're separate premises and separate.
Just to come back to Councillor Rout's earlier question about which of the two options would be more preferable, I would suggest the second one, which has been quite widely discussed, which is where we can potentially go and agree the capacity of a premises, etc., before the license becomes sort of active, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. And Councillor Root.
Yeah, thanks for that, Channing. It's because it's important that you guys are sort of in agreement about the best way forward, I think. So that's good that you're willing to do that, I guess, and that does kind of point us in a particular direction. I just wanted to say, I do recognise that I've sort of slightly been the awkward squad in this hearing and sort of asking the tricky questions, and I do very much want this development to work. But equally, I do need you all to understand, as people who are going to be running this very significant new addition to our neighbourhood, that when we grant these licenses, the people that you choose to go into them may or may not be able to make a living on the basis of the license that they've got. And the turnover of operator is not unusual for operators to turn over very quickly in this kind of development, where somebody puts quite a lot of money into something and then decides that they can't make it work. And I suppose what I'm mindful of is that, let's say this very big bar downstairs in the basement, which is slightly separate from the rest of the whole thing. It might be more difficult to find somebody who's of the same sort of caliber of operator that you're looking for. And, you know, economics being what they are, you know, it could end up being a sort of, you know, fairly rowdy sports bar or something like that. If you know, there's nothing. So the point I'm making, I suppose, is that what we're trying to do is to grant licenses which ensure everybody's safety in the longer term. And I'm therefore it's just a question, or that was a preamble to a question to Mr. Barber, really, which is about the terms of the lease that the operators are going to be taking on, and what the lease will say with regard to maintaining the terms of the license, and how much of a threat you as the owner of the building, running the building, will be holding over the operators to make sure that they adhere very firmly to the terms of the license. So that, if you like, you will be the first step of the policing of that license to some extent. What will your leases be saying about how important it is to maintain the license terms?
Chair, as that's a legal question, because there's two parts to that question. There's what in reality will Neil and Mike Gould do about tenants that aren't towing lines. I'll let them answer that. In terms of lease terms, which is a bit that I'll be drafting, I've drafted these lease terms. Most of my clients, I tend to do developer work, so our lease terms are very, very, very strict. That they can't apply for variation without our consent. If they get any type of warning, they have to tell us, etc., etc. There's about 10 or 15 different covenants that we put in the individual leases. On top of that, of course, this is what Neil was saying earlier, is that they had this dichotomy of trying to find the right tenant commercially and also a right fit for the development. Now, in terms of if we do get that scenario where we get a unit back, we either then grant a new lease ourselves because we've got the lease back and we can choose who it is. If they decide to sell the lease or assign it, they have to get our license to assign as landlord. They can't just assign it. We have to say, actually, we're happy with that new person, and if we're not happy with that new person for a variety of reasons, we could potentially block the assignment. And again, going back to this overriding point about why this development doesn't add to cumulative impact, that is something that the high street doesn't do, because it's not all joined up. It's not all joined up ownership. But Neil, in terms of the in practice points about tenants who...
Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered most of the points there. But actually, we've got very tight, user clauses, as well as I think you've touched on most of the licensing controls. But in terms of what they can do to it, who they can assign it or underlet it to, and as you say, we've also got step-in rights, because, as I say, going back to what I mentioned before, this is underneath a huge office building where the rent roll runs into tens of millions, and versus a very small a fraction of that for this unit. So having the wrong operator in here that's going to drag down the lettability in the first instance, or the longer term rents of the offices, is obviously not what we're after, and that applies throughout. So we have these preemption clauses where we can step in, and even if if we can't stop them assigning to someone else, if we match the price, we can take it back. So that's quite common in bigger developments. So we'd be looking to do that. As I mentioned too, all of these units are what we see as key to the whole placemaking thing, and to the amenity value of the whole place. So getting the right operator in there is the most important thing for us.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that.
Sorry, sorry, Councillor Smith, touching on your earlier point about the operator, I think when we get to the next stage, in terms of firming up on numbers and this, that, and the other, we won't be doing that until we've got an actual operator on board and involve them in that process. So you sort of get to know who they are at the same time. Yeah, that makes sense. I think we've had a great discussion. I hope you all agree. Councillor Root, are you happy with that? I mean, I think we talked a lot about a lot of the different issues here. Are you content to maybe move on to closing remarks?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so if we just have some closing remarks then, please. We should start off with the licensing authority. Mr. Riviere, if you want to come in just briefly with your closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. I understand a lot of the issues around this particular set of applications are to do with the capacity, and the committee is trying to seek that balance between what works for the local area, particularly this special policy area, and the licensing objectives. And that balance, it can be rebalanced by way of review. So if the committee were minded to proceed with some of the applications or all of the applications, whatever they were minded to do, if later on that was found to be not in support of the licensing objectives, then the licensing authority, the police, indeed any other person could submit a review to seek to revoke or amend those licenses. So I understand that the committee do have significant concerns, but it's not like there are not powers there to address any issues that arise. And I mean, with regards to the hours and stuff like that, I think they're not as contentious as some of the other premises within the SPA. And I understand the capacity is the big issue, but it's at the discretion of the committee, and I don't really have any other comments beyond that, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Riviere. That's very helpful. And Mr. Thomas, if you just want to come in and make your closing remarks, please.
Well, he said everything I was going to say, Chair, really. It was that point about the unknown of the residents. And I think that's the point. Unlike the planning system where consents are granted in perpetuity, these, of course, aren't. They are subject to that review process. And I certainly don't want to end up back in front of you saying, well, sorry, Chair. But there is that mechanism there. And that's the way the Licensing Act is designed. It's designed to be dynamic in that way. In all other respects, we have addressed the reasons for the cumulative impact policy, and these applications are on their merits, and they are absolutely unique in terms of what they both bring to the area and what they don't bring to the area in terms of adverse impacts. No other development in the area will have the safeguards that this development brings, and the diversity, the cultural benefits, etc. And as Neil said, it is a big multi-use development, and this is just a very small part of it. Chair, I'll ask Neil if he wants to say anything more. He probably won't, but I was just going to say this in the words of William Shakespeare itself. He might say, "To be or not to be, that's the question." I'm going to say, please let it to be, and we'll chat about the capacity later.
Thank you.
I can't really follow that, can I? I mean, all I'd say is, obviously, if you're in the area, we've got a marketing suite at 22 Curtin Road. There's a big model of the development, the bits that you can't see from the street. So feel free to pop in and have a look. But thanks for your time.
Great, thank you, everyone. I just want to call for any final points of clarification, Councillor Root. I have one that I'd like to talk about, but if you have any, please come in now.
No, I'm okay. I was just going to say thanks to everybody.
Okay.
I wanted to thank you as well. Thank you both for asking such good questions, and for it to be a very interesting hearing.
Yeah, and just back to the roof terraces and the time again. So I know you were slightly resistant to, I think it was 11 on a Friday and Saturday, wasn't it?
Yes, Chair. You
had before, and you were quite, sort of resistant to going down to 10. I mean, are you still resistant to that? I mean, I don't know what Councillor Root thinks about this. It would just throw everything into core hours, really, the whole lot into core hours, and also it would be in line with LP6. So I don't know, Councillor Root, do you think that's a good idea to pursue that, or do we offer a bit of leeway there, maybe 10:30 or something? Or
my view is the same as yours, really. This, I have to say, I think in some senses this application is stretching our policy in a way that it hasn't been stretched before, because of the capacity issue. And I think it would be, in fairness to the residents and other businesses locally, I think if we could keep it within core hours, it would show a commitment to this policy, which we do have. And we don't want to be undermining it ourselves. So I personally think that would be a sensible way to go forward.
Okay, thank you for that. And Mr. Thomas, do you want to just respond to that?
Chair, I was just looking it up myself. If you could give me 5 seconds. Yeah, LP6 does say 2,200 hours. It's a matter for you. I think you can. I can see the direction of travel. And of course that doesn't of course mean that an operator couldn't come back and ask for later. The responsible authorities were happy with the extra Friday and Saturday, but your policy does say 8 and 10 p.m.
Yeah, it just sort of fits better at the moment, at this particular stage, I would suggest, for us.
As Channing says, you know, you can always apply for variations later on if you're shown to be operating effectively and want a bit more time. You know, there's a possibility of that. But at this point, I think from the point of view of our policy's integrity, I would be very keen to stick with 10 o'clock.
I understand, Chair. As much as I don't like to admit I can't argue it any more than that, I'm going to leave it there.
Well, thank you everyone for your time. It's been a very hot day, and we've had a great discussion. I think all the points of clarification, we've made those now. We've got a really good understanding of the situation here. So yeah, I just want to thank you all for attending and being patient, and stay safe from the heat. So I don't think we've got anything else to consider. So all those people involved participating in this hearing, if you could now sign off, and then we'll go and deliberate our decision. So, but thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, goodbye, Chair. Goodbye, Councillor.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.